A rich woman kicked a veteran single dad out of her luxury store. But when his Medal of Honor hit the floor and made the security guard snap to attention, the entire room froze. And one whispered truth could destroy everything he thought he knew about his family. Will pride and pain tear them apart forever? Or can love and forgiveness rewrite their fate? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Rain drummed steadily against the windows of Ethan Walker's old pickup truck as he pulled into the mechanic shop's parking lot. His worn hands were still covered in grease from a long day of repairs, but his eyes lit up at the sight of Lily waiting inside. She sat on a wooden chair near the office, her backpack clutched close, drawing in her notebook as she always did after school. "Ready to head home, sweetheart?" Ethan asked, his voice warm despite his exhaustion. Lily bounced up, her pigtails swaying. "Dad, look what I drew today." She held up her notebook, showing a colorful picture of what looked like their small house, complete with a rainbow arching over it. "That's beautiful, honey." Ethan helped her into her rain jacket. "Let's get you home before this rain gets worse." Their truck rumbled through puddle-filled streets, windshield wipers squeaking as they worked overtime. Lily hummed softly beside him, still flipping through her notebook. Ethan glanced at her, his heart swelling with love and aching with worry at the same time. Her birthday was just days away, and his wallet felt lighter than ever. At home, their small kitchen welcomed them with familiar comfort, even if the linoleum was peeling at the corners and the cabinets had seen better days. Ethan set about boiling water for macaroni. It wasn't fancy, but it was Lily's favorite. "How about you work on your homework while I cook?" he suggested, pulling out a pot. Lily settled at their scratched kitchen table, spreading out her math worksheet. "Dad, Jenny got a new dress today. It has sparkles all over it." Ethan stirred the macaroni, trying to keep his voice steady. "Is that so?" "Yeah." She said her mom took her to the big store downtown. Lily erased something on her paper, then looked up hopefully. "Do you think maybe?" "Actually," Ethan said, forcing cheerfulness into his voice, "I've been thinking about your birthday. How would you like to go shopping for a new dress this weekend?" Lily's eyes widened. "Really? Like Jenny's?" "Well, maybe not exactly like Jenny's, but we'll find something special." Ethan mentally calculated what he could move around in their tight budget. Skip a few lunches at work, maybe put off that oil change his truck desperately needed. They ate their macaroni together, Lily chattering about her day at school, about the science project they started, about Tommy putting a frog in Sarah's desk, about the spelling test she aced. Ethan listened intently, asking questions, treasuring these simple moments, even as worry gnawed at him. After dinner, Lily helped dry the dishes, something she insisted on doing ever since she turned 8, wanting to be grown up. Ethan watched her careful movements, remembering how her mother used to do the same thing, standing in this very spot. "Bath time, kiddo," he announced once they finished. "Then we can read a chapter before bed." Later, with Lily freshly bathed and in her worn but clean pajamas, Ethan sat on the edge of her small bed. The room was modest, just a twin bed, a dresser with missing knobs, and walls decorated with Lily's artwork. But it was filled with love. "Once upon a time," Ethan began, opening their current book, a library copy they'd checked out last week. Lily snuggled closer, her damp hair leaving a wet spot on his shirt. One chapter turned into 2. Ethan could never resist when Lily asked, "Just one more page," with those big eyes of hers. Finally, he tucked the blanket around her shoulders and kissed her forehead. "Good night, princess. I love you." "Love you too, Dad," Lily mumbled, already half asleep. In his own bedroom, Ethan sat heavily on the edge of his bed. The Medal of Honor sat on his nightstand, catching the dim light from his lamp. He picked it up, running his thumb over its surface. The weight of it felt heavy in his hands, heavier than its physical mass should allow. "I'm trying, Sarah," he whispered to the quiet room, to his wife who wasn't there. "I'm trying to give her everything she needs." His voice caught. "I promise I'll take care of our little girl no matter what. He paused, swallowing hard. "I just wish you were here to see her grow up, to help me figure out all this stuff about dresses and birthdays and—" He trailed off, listening to the rain still falling outside. The medal glinted in his hands, a reminder of valor and sacrifice. But right now, Ethan would trade all the medals in the world for the ability to give Lily the life she deserved, the life Sarah would have wanted for her. He placed the medal back on the nightstand, its presence both a comfort and a bittersweet reminder of everything that had brought him to this point. The next afternoon, clouds hung low over downtown, but nothing could dampen Lily Walker's excitement. Her yellow rain boots splashed through puddles as she skipped ahead of her father, her brown pigtails bouncing with each step. "Careful, sweetheart," Ethan called, quickening his pace to catch up. His work boots were still stained with motor oil from his shift at the garage, and his old jean jacket had seen better days. But none of that mattered. Today was about making his little girl happy. "Look, Daddy." Lily pressed her nose against a gleaming storefront window. Inside, mannequins wore flowing dresses that sparkled under crystal chandeliers. "It's like a princess store." Ethan's stomach tightened as he looked at the boutique's elegant facade. The name Langford Co. was etched in gold letters above the door. This place was way above his budget, but he'd been saving for months. Lily deserved something special for her birthday. "Ready to find your perfect dress?" he asked, holding the heavy glass door open for her. Lily's eyes went wide as they stepped inside. The store smelled of expensive perfume, and soft classical music played overhead. Well-dressed women browsed racks of designer clothing, carrying shopping bags from other high-end stores. A saleswoman in a crisp black suit gave them a quick once-over before turning away. Ethan felt the weight of stares from other customers, their eyes lingering on his worn clothing and work-roughened hands. "The children's section is over here," he whispered to Lily, guiding her toward a corner filled with tiny formal dresses. Her small fingers reached out to touch a pale pink dress with delicate lace trim. "It's so pretty," she breathed. "May I help you?" The sharp voice cut through the quiet store like a knife. A tall woman in an expensive cream-colored suit stood before them, her perfectly styled blonde hair and flawless makeup radiating authority. Victoria Langford's steel-blue eyes narrowed as she looked Ethan up and down. "I think you may have wandered into the wrong establishment," she said coldly. "This is a luxury boutique, not a discount store." Ethan's face flushed, but he kept his voice steady. "We're here to buy a dress for my daughter's birthday." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "I see. And how exactly do you plan to pay for anything here? Our dresses start at prices I doubt someone in your position could afford." Lily's small hand gripped Ethan's tighter. Other customers had stopped browsing to watch the scene unfold. "Ma'am, I have money to spend," Ethan said quietly, fighting to maintain his dignity. "We're just looking for something special." "Security!" Victoria called out, her voice ringing through the store. "We have someone here who needs to be escorted out." A broad-shouldered security guard approached quickly. Lily's lower lip trembled as tears welled up in her eyes. "Daddy?" she whimpered. "This man and his child need to leave," Victoria announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We can't have people coming in off the street, disturbing our legitimate customers." Ethan's chest tightened with humiliation as heads turned. Some customers whispered behind manicured hands, while others simply stared. "Come on, sir," the security guard said, reaching for Ethan's arm. "Don't touch me," Ethan said firmly, his voice low but strong. "We're leaving." As he turned to go, his old leather wallet slipped from his jacket pocket, hitting the polished floor with a soft thud. Its contents scattered across the marble tiles, a few worn bills, a faded photo of his late wife, and something else that caught the light. A gold star hanging from a blue ribbon. The security guard bent to help gather the fallen items, then froze. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. The guard's expression transformed from stern authority to dawning recognition. In one fluid motion, he straightened to his full height and snapped to attention, executing a precise military salute. "Sir," the guard's voice boomed through the now silent store. "I apologize for this treatment. It's an honor to meet a Medal of Honor recipient." The change in the atmosphere was immediate and electric. Victoria's face drained of color. Customers who had been whispering now stood stock still, their expressions shifting from disdain to shock. "My deepest apologies, Mr. Walker," the guard continued, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed boutique. "I served 12 years myself, and I know what that medal represents. You shouldn't be treated this way anywhere, least of all here." Lily looked up at her father, tears still streaming down her cheeks. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his jaw set firmly as he faced the crowd of onlookers. The same people who had been staring at his shabby clothes now couldn't meet his eyes. Several customers removed their hats in respect. A woman in an expensive fur coat pressed her hand to her mouth, looking ashamed. Victoria Langford stood frozen, her perfectly composed facade cracking as the full weight of her mistake became clear. The security guard held out the wallet and medal with both hands, showing them the respect such items deserved. "Sir, please accept my sincerest apologies," he said, maintaining his rigid posture of attention. Outside the boutique's gleaming windows, Ethan Walker knelt on the wet sidewalk, pulling his trembling daughter close. Lily's small shoulders shook with sobs as she buried her face into his worn jacket, her tears mixing with the light drizzle that fell around them. "Shh, sweetheart. It's okay," Ethan whispered, his calloused hand smoothing her damp hair. His heart ached seeing her distress, but years of military training helped him maintain his composure. "We're okay." The security guard, a tall man with graying temples, stood nearby holding Ethan's weathered wallet with careful reverence. His earlier stern expression had melted into one of deep respect as he looked at the Medal of Honor that had fallen out. "Sir," the guard said, his voice carrying a mixture of embarrassment and admiration, "please." He extended the wallet and medal toward Ethan with both hands, as if handling something precious. "This belongs to you, and I want you to know what an honor it is to meet you." Ethan reluctantly released Lily with one arm to accept his belongings, trying to stuff them quickly into his pocket, but the guard wasn't finished. He straightened his back and raised his right hand in a crisp salute. "Thank you for your service and sacrifice, sir." The formal gesture drew the attention of passing shoppers, who slowed to watch the scene unfold. Through the boutique's windows, several customers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation now stood frozen, their shopping bags forgotten at their feet. An elderly man removed his hat, pressing it to his chest. A young mother whispered something to her curious child, who stopped fidgeting and stood straighter. The atmosphere had shifted from one of judgment to quiet recognition. Ethan's face burned. He'd never wanted attention for his service, especially not like this. The medal felt heavy in his pocket, a weight that reminded him of everything he'd lost, everything he still carried. Lily's sniffles had quieted, but she kept a death grip on his jacket. Her small voice wavered. "Daddy, why were they mean to us?" The simple question cut through him like a knife. How could he explain prejudice and snap judgments to an 8-year-old? How could he tell her that some people would always see their worn clothes first and their worth second? Through the glass, he caught a glimpse of Victoria Langford's retreating figure. Her elegant posture remained rigid as she marched toward the back of the store, designer heels clicking against marble floors. She didn't look back, didn't offer the apology her actions demanded. Her pride seemed to radiate even through the window panes. "Come on, princess," Ethan said softly, rising to his feet and keeping Lily's hand firmly in his. "Let's go home." They walked 3 blocks to the bus stop, Lily unusually quiet beside him. The rain had picked up, creating silver sheets between the buildings. When the bus arrived, its wipers squeaking across the windshield, they climbed aboard and found seats near the middle. Other passengers glanced their way. The security guard's loud salute had attracted enough attention that some recognized them from the scene outside the boutique. An older woman smiled warmly at Lily. A man in a business suit nodded respectfully at Ethan. But the kindness only made Ethan's chest tighter. He pulled Lily closer to his side as the bus rumbled through puddle-filled streets, the familiar route home now feeling like an escape route. "Listen to me, Lilypad," he whispered, using his special nickname for her. His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "We're never going back there again. Never." Lily looked up at him with her mother's eyes, still red-rimmed from crying but full of trust. She didn't argue or ask why. She just squeezed his hand 3 times, their secret code for "I love you," and leaned her head against his arm. The bus continued its journey through the gray afternoon, carrying them away from the glittering boutique windows and the weight of others' judgments. Ethan stared straight ahead, his jaw set, while his daughter's warm hand in his reminded him of what really mattered. They had each other, and that was enough. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the world outside into a watercolor of muted colors. The medal in Ethan's pocket pressed against his leg, a reminder of honor earned and dignity tested. But right now, he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a father who had failed to protect his little girl from the harsh realities of a world that sometimes saw uniforms and medals, but missed the humanity beneath them. The familiar streets of their neighborhood began to appear through the rain-spattered glass. Ethan watched as they passed the corner grocery where they bought their bread on sale, the park where Lily played on sunny afternoons, the small church where they sat in the back pew every Sunday. These were their places, where they belonged, where no one questioned their right to exist. As the bus drove on, Lily's breathing grew steady against his arm. Her small body relaxed despite the day's upheaval. Her resilience amazed him, just as it had amazed him every day since her mother's passing. She was so much stronger than anyone knew, stronger than the fancy people in that boutique could ever imagine. Victoria Langford sat in her elegant penthouse suite, a glass of expensive red wine untouched in her manicured hand. The city lights twinkled beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, but she couldn't focus on their usual calming effect. All she could see was the little girl's face, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched her father's worn jacket. The memory made her stomach turn. She set down the wine glass with a sharp click against the marble side table. "Miss Langford?" Sarah, her assistant, appeared in the doorway of the living room. The young woman's face held an unusual expression, a mixture of concern and disappointment that she rarely dared show. "I have that information you asked for." Victoria straightened in her cream-colored armchair, smoothing her silk blouse. "Come in, Sarah. What did you find?" Sarah crossed the room, tablet in hand, her practical flat silent against the plush carpet. She perched on the edge of the sofa across from Victoria, her usual professional demeanor slightly strained. "His name is Ethan Walker," Sarah began, swiping through screens. 34 years old. Served 3 tours overseas with the Army Rangers. He's quite remarkable, actually." Victoria's perfectly arched eyebrows drew together. "How so?" Sarah turned the tablet around, showing Victoria a newspaper article with a younger Ethan in his military uniform. His eyes were clearer then, his stance proud. He received the Medal of Honor for his actions in combat. During an ambush, he saved his entire unit and 3 civilian families. Even after being shot twice, he went back into the firefight to rescue a child trapped in a collapsed building. The words hit Victoria like physical blows. She remembered the medal that had fallen from his wallet, the one she'd been too proud to acknowledge even after seeing it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she took the tablet. "There's more," Sarah said quietly. She reached over and swiped to another article. This one showed a funeral service, American flags draped everywhere. While he was deployed on his final tour, his wife Rachel died suddenly, an aneurysm. She was alone with their daughter when it happened. Lily was only 4. Victoria's throat tightened. She thought of the little girl's rain boots, scuffed but clearly well cared for. The way her father had sheltered her, even as Victoria had security escort them out like common criminals. "He works 2 jobs now," Sarah continued, her voice soft but pointed. "Mechanic during the day, night security on weekends. Everything he makes goes to taking care of Lily. They live in a small apartment on the east side. He's never missed a parent-teacher conference, never been late on Lily's school payments, even though it means sometimes going without things himself." The tablet showed more pictures. Ethan at a school function, his clothes clean but obviously worn, beaming as Lily held up an art project. Another of him in his mechanic's uniform, helping at a community car repair clinic for veterans. The local veterans community considers him a hero, not just for his service but for how he helps others despite his own struggles. He volunteers at the VA hospital, mentors other single parents, even coaches Little League when he can spare the time. Victoria stood abruptly, walking to the window. The city spread out below her, a glittering carpet of lights and possibilities. Her own reflection stared back at her. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. She barely recognized herself. "And I treated him like a vagrant," she whispered, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. "I humiliated a war hero in front of his daughter." "There's one more thing," Sarah said, her voice even quieter now. "Lily. She attended Little Angels preschool before starting elementary school. It's the same church preschool your family's foundation used to support." Victoria's head snapped up. "What?" "Your brother Thomas served on their board before he passed away. He would have known Rachel Walker, known their story." The mention of Thomas, gone 2 years now from cancer, made Victoria's chest ache. He had always been the better one, the kinder one. He would have recognized Ethan Walker, would have shown him respect instead of disdain. Sarah stood, gathering her things. "Will you need anything else tonight, Miss Langford?" Victoria shook her head. still staring out at the city. She heard Sarah's quiet footsteps, then the soft click of the door closing. Alone again, Victoria wrapped her arms around herself. The penthouse suddenly felt too large, too empty. She thought of Ethan Walker's small apartment, probably filled with love despite its size. Thought of him working double shifts, making mac and cheese for his daughter, reading her bedtime stories. Her own prejudice and arrogance twisted in her gut like a knife. She judged him solely on his appearance, never considering the story behind his worn clothes and calloused hands, never imagining the sacrifice and honor they represented. The city lights blurred as tears filled her eyes. She pressed her palm against the window, remembering Lily's small face, remembering the dignity with which Ethan had held himself, even as she'd torn him down. "I have to find him," Victoria whispered to her reflection, her voice thick with emotion. "I have to make this right." The morning dawned gray and chilly. Ethan's old pickup truck rattled as he drove Lily to school, the heater working overtime against the autumn chill. His daughter hummed quietly in the passenger's seat, her backpack clutched close. "You okay, sweetheart?" Ethan glanced at her between watching the road. Lily nodded, but her usual spark was dim.
"I just wish we could have gotten the dress."
Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The memory of yesterday's humiliation burned fresh in his mind. "We'll find another store, honey. A better one." They pulled up to the elementary school, joining the line of cars dropping off students. Lily leaned over and kissed his cheek. "I love you, Daddy." "Love you too, kiddo." He watched her skip toward the building, her purple backpack bouncing with each step. The sight always made his heart ache. She looked so much like her mother. An hour later, Ethan's muscles strained as he lifted heavy boxes at Gardner's warehouse. The work was mindless but demanding. Sweat dripped down his back despite the cool temperature. This was his second job, the one that helped make ends meet when his mechanic's wages fell short. "Walker!" his supervisor called. "Lunch break!" Ethan grabbed his worn lunch bag and headed to the employee break room. The space was cramped but clean, with a few metal tables and a humming vending machine. He had just unwrapped his peanut butter sandwich when the door opened. Victoria Langford stood in the doorway, looking completely out of place in her designer outfit and perfect makeup. The other workers stared. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice softer than yesterday. "May I speak with you?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "How did you find me?" I asked around. She stepped closer, wringing her hands. "Please, I need to apologize for yesterday. My behavior was inexcusable." "You're right. It was." Ethan took another bite of his sandwich, deliberately not looking at her. Victoria pulled out a chair and sat down, though he hadn't invited her. "I've learned about your service, your sacrifice, what you did for our country." "Stop." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "I don't want your pity." "It's not pity," Victoria insisted. "I was wrong. Terribly wrong. I judged you without knowing anything about you. And now that you know I have a medal, suddenly I'm worthy of respect?" He crumpled his lunch bag. "That's the problem with people like you. You only see what you want to see." Victoria flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Ethan laughed without humor. "Was it fair to humiliate me in front of my daughter? To treat me like dirt because my clothes aren't expensive enough for your taste?" "No, it wasn't." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Please, let me make it right. I could help." "I don't want your help," Ethan cut her off. "I don't want your money, or your guilt, or whatever else you're offering. What I want is for you to leave me alone." He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. The other workers quickly looked away, pretending they hadn't been watching the exchange. "Mr. Walker, please, I have work to do." He walked out, leaving his half-eaten lunch behind. The afternoon dragged by in a blur of heavy lifting and trying to forget Victoria's face. By the time his shift ended, Ethan's back ached, and his mood hadn't improved. He drove to pick up Lily from the after-school program, parking in his usual spot. As he walked toward the building, he saw a familiar figure standing near the entrance. Victoria was there, elegant as ever, though her usual confidence seemed dim. Before he could say anything, the doors burst open and children poured out. Lily emerged with her friends, her face lighting up when she spotted him. "Daddy!" But then she saw Victoria. To Ethan's surprise, his daughter didn't shrink away. Instead, she walked right up to the woman, who knelt down to her level. "Hello, Lily," Victoria said gently. I wanted to say I'm sorry about yesterday. Lily tilted her head, studying Victoria with that direct, innocent gaze that children have. Then she smiled, a small, secret smile that reminded Ethan so much of her mother it hurt. It's okay, Lily said. Then, in a whisper that carried in the quiet afternoon air, Mommy says you're my daddy. The world seemed to stop. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face as the words hit him like a physical blow. Victoria's eyes widened in shock, her perfectly composed expression cracking. Time stood still in that moment. Ethan frozen in place, Victoria still kneeling beside Lily, and his daughter looking between them with innocent curiosity. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the schoolyard, and somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked, but Ethan couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe properly. All he could do was stare at his daughter, his Lily, as everything he thought he knew about his life, his marriage, and his family suddenly tilted on its axis. Evening shadows crept across the worn carpet of the Walkers' small living room. Ethan's footsteps made soft thuds as he paced back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back. The words kept echoing in his mind. Mommy says you're my daddy. Each time they repeated, his chest grew tighter. At the kitchen table, Lily sat surrounded by colored pencils, her tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated on her drawing. The scratch of pencil against paper was the only sound breaking the heavy silence. She seemed oblivious to her father's turmoil, happily adding splashes of purple to what looked like a unicorn. Ethan paused by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on outside. His reflection stared back at him. Tired eyes, worry lines etched deeper than usual. He studied Lily's features from across the room. Her nose, her chin, the way her eyebrows furrowed when she concentrated. He'd always seen Sarah in those features. His late wife's face swam before his eyes, beautiful and familiar, but now clouded with questions he'd never thought to ask. What are you drawing, sweetheart? His voice came out rougher than intended. Lily held up her artwork proudly. It's our family, see? There's you and me and... She hesitated, then added softly, Mommy in heaven. Ethan's throat tightened. He crossed to the table and crouched beside her chair, studying the crayon figures. 3 smiling stick people, one with wings. So simple, so certain. If only everything could be as clear as a child's drawing. Tell me about Mommy, he said carefully. What do you remember? Lily tapped her purple pencil against her chin. She had pretty hair, and she sang me songs. Her face scrunched up in concentration. Sometimes I dream about her, but I can't remember if they're real memories or just dreams. Ethan nodded, his heart aching. Lily had been so young when Sarah died. Barely 4 years old. How much could she truly remember? And how much were stories he'd told her, photographs she'd seen, wishes she'd turned into memories? Across town, Victoria Langford stood in her elegant study, a crystal glass of untouched wine in her hand. Her brother James's face smiled at her from a silver-framed photograph on her desk. He'd been gone 5 years now, but sometimes his voice was still so clear in her memory. There was this woman, Vic, he told her once, late at night after too many drinks. The most amazing person I've ever met. But she was married, and I respected that, even if... He'd never finished that sentence. Victoria set down her glass with trembling fingers. Could Sarah Walker have been that woman? The timing would fit. James had been stationed at the same base as Ethan and Sarah before his deployment to Afghanistan, before the IED that took his life. Back in the Walker home, Ethan helped Lily gather her art supplies. Time for bed, kiddo, he said, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. Can I have 2 stories tonight? Lily asked, batting her eyelashes in a way that usually melted his resolve. 1 story, he countered, grateful for the familiar routine. But you can pick which one. As he helped her into her pajamas and tucked her into bed, Ethan studied every detail of her face, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her cheeks, the color of her hair. He'd always thought she looked just like Sarah, but now doubt crept in like poison. Was he seeing what he wanted to see? Lily chose The Velveteen Rabbit, her current favorite. Ethan read it mechanically, his mind wandering even as his voice brought the story to life. When he finished, Lily was already heavy-lidded with sleep. Love you, Daddy, she murmured as he kissed her forehead. Love you too, baby girl. The words caught in his throat. More than anything. He left her nightlight glowing and pulled her door mostly closed. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the floor. Sarah's photograph hung nearby, her smile radiant and unchanged. They'd been so happy, hadn't they? Their love had been real. It had to have been real. But there were those months when he'd been deployed, when communication had been spotty at best. And that period when Sarah had seemed distant, distracted. He'd attributed it to the stress of separation, the strain of military life. Had there been more? The house creaked and settled around him as the night deepened. Ethan remained on the floor, his mind spinning with possibilities he'd never considered. His chest felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out everything he thought he knew and left only questions behind. What if I don't even know the truth about my own daughter? He whispered into the darkness. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The silence offered no answers, and the photograph of Sarah kept its secrets behind that eternal smile. In the distance, a car alarm briefly wailed and fell silent. A dog barked. Life went on around him, oblivious to how his world had tilted on its axis. Down the hall, Lily's soft breathing carried through the quiet house, the sound that had anchored him through countless difficult nights since Sarah's death. Tonight, even that familiar comfort brought its own kind of pain. The Sunday morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden pews. Ethan Walker straightened his tie, one of the few nice things he still owned from before his deployment, as he guided Lily through the double doors. Her patent leather shoes clicked against the floor, and her blue dress, though a bit too short now, had been carefully ironed the night before. "Daddy, look at the cookies." Lily pointed toward the fellowship hall where a table of refreshments awaited after service. That's when Ethan saw her. Victoria Langford stood by the children's classroom door, wearing a simple, cream-colored dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent. She was arranging craft supplies on a small table, her perfectly manicured hands organizing colored paper and safety scissors. Ethan's jaw tightened. This was his sanctuary, his and Lily's special place where they could find peace. Now even that felt invaded. "Good morning, Lily." Victoria's voice was gentle as she waved at them. Several other children were already gathering around her, drawn to the promise of Sunday school crafts. "Can I go say hi, Daddy?" Lily looked up at him with hopeful eyes. "We need to find our seats," Ethan said firmly. But Lily had already slipped from his grasp and skipped toward the classroom. "We're making paper angels today," Victoria explained to the growing group of children. She glanced at Ethan, her expression careful and measured. "All the kids are welcome to join us after the main service." Ethan walked over, his footsteps heavy on the carpet. "Miss Langford," he said in a low voice, "I don't know why you're here." "I've been volunteering with the children's ministry for 3 weeks now," she interrupted softly. "I started after." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "After our unfortunate encounter, I didn't know you attended here." 3 weeks? Ethan frowned. They usually came to early service, but today they were late because his alarm hadn't gone off. "We don't need your help or your charity." Victoria's cheeks flushed slightly, but she kept her composure. "This isn't about you, Mr. Walker. The church needed volunteers, and I wanted to do something meaningful with my Sunday mornings." Before Ethan could respond, Mrs. Chen, the elderly Sunday school coordinator, approached with a warm smile. "Oh, Victoria dear, you brought the snacks. The children will be so excited." She turned to Ethan. "Isn't she wonderful? She's been such a blessing to our program." Lily was already at the craft table, happily sorting through colored paper with her friends. Victoria had placed a small package of graham crackers and apple slices near her, the exact snack Lily had mentioned wanting the other day at school. "The service is starting," Ethan said stiffly. "Lily, come on." "But Daddy, can I stay for Sunday school? Please?" Lily's eyes were bright with excitement. "Miss Victoria said we're making angels for the nursing home." Ethan saw other parents dropping their children off, their faces relaxed and trusting. He looked at Victoria, who was now helping a small boy with his craft smock, her designer dress forgotten as she knelt on the carpet beside him. "Fine," he conceded, his voice tight. "But straight to our pew after Sunday school, understand?" "Yes, Daddy." Lily hugged his legs quickly before running back to join her friends. Throughout the service, Ethan barely heard the sermon. His mind kept wandering to the classroom down the hall, to Victoria's presence in this space, that it always felt safe and familiar. The same woman who had humiliated him in the boutique was now serving snacks to his daughter. When the service ended, he found Lily clutching a carefully made paper angel, her face glowing with pride. Victoria stood back, giving them space, but Lily ran to her anyway. "Thank you for helping me with the glitter, Miss Victoria, and the graham crackers were my favorite." Victoria smiled warmly, but kept her distance from Ethan. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Your angel is beautiful. I'm sure it will make someone at the nursing home very happy." "Miss Victoria knows all about angels, Daddy," Lily declared. "She told us they're God's helpers who watch over people who need love." Ethan's chest tightened at his daughter's words. He placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "We need to go, honey. Say goodbye." Victoria gathered her things, slipping her designer purse over her shoulder. "Have a blessed Sunday," she said quietly, already turning to leave. "Bye, Miss Victoria," Lily called out, waving enthusiastically. "See you next Sunday." As Victoria's figure disappeared through the church doors, Ethan watched his daughter carefully folding her paper angel, humming the song they'd learned in Sunday school. Her face showed nothing but joy and innocence, unaware of the complicated emotions swirling around her. "Did you see how Miss Victoria helped Tommy when he spilled his juice?" Lily chatted as they walked to their car. "She didn't even get mad when it got on her pretty dress. And she knows all the best stories about Jesus, Daddy." Ethan helped Lily into her booster seat, his movements mechanical as his mind raced. The woman who had ordered security to throw them out of her store was now teaching his daughter about angels and serving snacks with a genuine smile. The contrast made his head hurt. "She's different here," Lily said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "Not like at the fancy store. She's nice here, like how Mommy said people are different when they're in God's house." Ethan froze for a moment, then slowly closed Lily's car door. As he walked around to the driver's side, he saw Victoria's expensive car pulling out of the parking lot. His daughter waved happily through the window, and even from this distance, he caught the small, sad smile Victoria gave in return before driving away. The streetlights cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk as Ethan trudged up the steps to his small apartment. His muscles ached from hours of lifting boxes at the warehouse, and his mind felt foggy with exhaustion. He fumbled with his keys, already thinking about the empty fridge waiting inside, but something made him pause. There, stacked neatly by his front door, were several brown paper grocery bags. Ethan's jaw tightened as he spotted the cream-colored note placed carefully on top. The elegant handwriting was unmistakable. "For Lily. V. You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Part of him wanted to leave the bags right there, a clear message that he didn't need anyone's charity, especially not Victoria Langford's. But as he lifted one bag to move it aside, the contents shifted. Fresh fruit, vegetables, pasta, and even some of those special cookies Lily loved but he could rarely afford. His stomach growled traitorously. Inside the apartment, he set the bags on the counter and began unpacking them, his movements sharp with frustration. Each item seemed carefully chosen. Healthy snacks for Lily's lunchbox, ingredients for proper dinners, even some cleaning supplies they'd been running low on. "Daddy?" Lily's sleepy voice came from the hallway. She rubbed her eyes, her pink pajamas wrinkled from sleep. "What's all that?" "Just some groceries, sweetheart," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice light. "Go back to bed, it's late." But Lily was already padding over to the counter, her eyes widening at the sight of her favorite apple juice. "Did Miss Victoria bring these? She told me she would." Ethan's hand stilled on a box of cereal. "When did she tell you that?" "At church. She asked what kind of juice I like." Lily reached for an apple, her small face hopeful. "Can I have one?" Ethan wanted to say no, wanted to pack everything back up and return it. But Lily's eager expression melted his resolve. One apple, then straight back to bed. The next afternoon, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, Lily's after-school teacher. His heart jumped. Was Lily okay? But the message simply read, "Don't worry." Victoria Langford cleared it with the office to bring art supplies for the children's program. He left work early, driving perhaps a little too fast to the school. Through the classroom window, he saw Victoria sitting at a low table with several children, including Lily. She traded her usual designer clothes for a simple sweater and jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Victoria was showing Lily how to mix watercolors, her hands gentle as she guided the brush. Other kids crowded around, eager for their turn. But Victoria gave each child her full attention. She didn't look like someone plotting something sinister. She looked natural. "Mr. Walker," Mrs. Chen greeted him warmly. "Your daughter is quite the artist. Miss Langford brought some really wonderful supplies for our art program." "Did she now?" Ethan's voice was flat. "Oh yes, and she's volunteered to help twice a week. The children adore her already." Inside the classroom, Lily looked up and spotted him. "Daddy, look what I made." She held up a painting of what might have been a rainbow or possibly a very colorful horse. Her smile was brighter than he'd seen in weeks. Victoria met his eyes across the room, and for a moment, he saw uncertainty flash across her face. But then Lily tugged on her sleeve, asking about adding more purple, and Victoria turned back to help her. Ethan watched as his daughter chatted animatedly with Victoria, showing her more paintings and giggling at something the woman said. The scene stirred something painful in his chest, a mix of gratitude and resentment, hope and fear. What right did this woman have to walk into their lives like this, to give Lily things he couldn't provide, to make his daughter smile in a way that reminded him so sharply of her mother? But the harder question burned deeper. What if Lily's whispered words at school held some truth? What if Victoria knew something about his late wife, about Lily's past, that he didn't? Victoria helped Lily clean her paintbrushes, praising her careful attention to detail. His daughter beamed under the attention, and the sight made Ethan's throat tight. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had the energy to sit and do art with her, to make her laugh like that. "Time to go, Lily," he called out, perhaps more sharply than necessary. Lily's face fell slightly, but she nodded, gathering her paintings. "Can I show Miss Victoria my drawings tomorrow?" Before Ethan could answer, Victoria spoke gently. "Why don't you save them to show me next time? Your daddy probably has plans for you today." The consideration in her voice only made Ethan more uneasy. He watched Lily give Victoria a quick hug goodbye, the gesture so natural it seemed like they'd known each other forever instead of just days. As they walked to the car, Lily clutched her paintings, talking excitedly about colors and techniques, and how Miss Victoria had taught her to make clouds look real. Each word of praise for Victoria felt like a small stone added to the weight in Ethan's chest. He looked back once to see Victoria watching them through the window, her expression unreadable. The late afternoon sun caught her face, and for a moment, she looked almost sad. Ethan helped Lily into her car seat, his movements mechanical as his mind raced with questions he couldn't answer. Who was Victoria Langford, really? What did she want? And most terrifying of all, what truths might she know that could shatter the fragile world he'd built for his daughter? The autumn breeze rustled through the trees at Jefferson Park, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant food carts. Ethan sat on a weathered wooden bench, his work-worn hands clasped together as he watched Victoria help Lily untangle the strings of a bright blue kite. "Like this?" Lily asked, her small fingers working at a knot. "That's perfect," Victoria said, kneeling beside her in simple jeans and a cream sweater, a far cry from her usual designer outfits. "Now, hold it up high when you run." Ethan shifted uncomfortably on the bench. He'd only agreed to this outing because Lily had begged him for 3 straight days after Victoria offered to teach her how to fly a kite. The sight of his daughter's excitement made his chest tighten. It had been so long since he'd seen her this happy. Victoria glanced his way, then quickly looked down at the kite again. Her perfectly styled hair was coming loose in the wind, making her seem more human somehow, less like the cold woman from the boutique. "Ready?" Victoria called to Lily. "Remember what I showed you. Run into the wind." Lily took off across the grass, her pink sneakers pounding against the earth as she held the kite high. The blue diamond danced and bobbed behind her, trying to catch the breeze. Victoria jogged alongside, offering gentle encouragement. "A little faster. That's it." To Ethan's surprise, the kite suddenly caught an updraft and soared skyward. Lily's delighted squeal echoed across the park. "Daddy, look, I'm doing it." "Great job, sweetheart," Ethan called back, unable to stop a small smile from forming. Victoria guided Lily back toward the bench, helping her control the kite string. As Lily concentrated on keeping the kite aloft, Victoria sank onto the opposite end of the bench from Ethan. Her usual confident demeanor seemed to falter. "Thank you," she said quietly, watching Lily, "for letting me be here today." Ethan nodded stiffly, but didn't respond. The silence stretched between them, broken only by Lily's continued exclamations of joy. "I used to come here with my brother," Victoria said suddenly, her voice soft. "Before he died. We'd fly kites just like this. Something in her tone made Ethan turn to look at her. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, but they seemed far away. James was the good one in our family, she continued. He actually cared about people, not just appearances and social standing like our parents. She gave a bitter laugh. The last time I saw him, we fought. I told him he was throwing his life away, working at that community center instead of joining Father's business. The wind tugged at her hair again, and she absently tucked it behind her ear. He died 2 weeks later. Car accident. I never got to tell him I was wrong. Ethan found himself studying her profile, seeing for the first time the pain etched in the corners of her mouth. I'm sorry about your brother, he said quietly. Victoria's shoulders slumped slightly. Our parents, they're not good people, Mr. Walker. They taught us that worth was measured by bank accounts and social circles. James rejected that. She paused, swallowing hard. I embraced it. And look where it got me. Living alone in that big empty penthouse, so disconnected from real life that I treated a war hero like a criminal. Her honesty caught him off guard. The carefully maintained wall of his anger cracked, just slightly. Daddy! Victoria! Watch this! Lily called out, making the kite dive and swoop. They both smiled at her enthusiasm before Victoria spoke again. I haven't spoken to my parents in 3 years. Not since I started questioning everything they taught me. Sometimes I wonder if I'll end up just like them, bitter and alone, pushing away anyone who doesn't fit their narrow view of the world. You're here now, Ethan found himself saying. That's something different. Victoria turned to him, surprise flickering across her face. Yes, she said softly. I suppose it island. They watched as Lily continued to guide the kite through the afternoon sky, its blue shape dancing against the clouds. A hot dog vendor passed nearby, and the smell of grilled onions wafted toward them. Are you hungry, Lily? Victoria called out. Before Ethan could protest, she added, My treat. Please, let me do this small thing. Lily bounced over, the kite string still clutched firmly in her hands. Can we, Daddy? Please? Ethan looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Victoria. The wealthy woman who had humiliated him was still there. But now he could see something else too. Someone lonely. Someone trying to change. All right, he said finally. Thank you. As Victoria went to get their hot dogs, Ethan helped Lily adjust her grip on the kite string. The blue diamond soared higher, catching a perfect gust of wind. Lily's giggle of pure joy filled the air, and Ethan felt the corners of his mouth turn up in a faint smile. He was still guarded. There were too many questions, too many doubts for him to fully let his defenses down. But for this moment, watching his daughter's happiness touch the sky, he allowed himself to simply be present. Victoria returned with the food, and they ate while Lily told them both about all the shapes she could make the kite draw in the air. The afternoon sun warm on their faces, the wind carrying the scent of autumn, and somewhere in the space between them, something shifted, small and fragile, but real. Lily paced backstage in the school auditorium, her sparkly second-hand dress catching the dim light. Her small hands fidgeted with the wrinkled program sheet listing her name among the performers. Around her, other kids practiced their acts, some juggling, others rehearsing dance moves or magic tricks. What if I mess up, Daddy? Lily whispered, her lower lip trembling. Ethan knelt beside her, straightening the blue ribbon in her hair, the one he'd found in a drawer of her mother's old things. His weathered hands were gentle, still carrying traces of motor oil despite his best efforts to scrub them clean after his shift. You won't mess up, sweetheart. We've practiced your part so many times. He managed a reassuring smile, though his own stomach churned with worry. The truth was, he felt completely out of place here among the other parents in their fine clothes, carrying expensive cameras and bouquets. Miss Thompson, the music teacher, hurried over with an excited flush on her cheeks. Oh, Mr. Walker! The most wonderful thing has happened! An anonymous donor just funded our entire music program for the next 3 years. We'll have new instruments, sheet music, everything. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he caught a glimpse of familiar, elegant heels disappearing around the corner. Before he could process this, Victoria emerged from the other direction, carrying a guitar case. I hope I'm not too late, she said softly. Lily mentioned you used to play, Ethan. I thought maybe. She held out the case. Lily bounced on her toes. Are you going to sing with me, Daddy? Like you used to? Ethan's throat tightened. He hadn't touched a guitar since coming home from deployment. The lullaby he'd sung to Lily as a baby, the one her mother had loved, felt stuck somewhere deep in his chest. "I don't know if I can," he murmured. Victoria stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Sometimes the things that scare us most are exactly what we need to do." The backstage bustle faded as Ethan looked at his daughter's hopeful face. With trembling hands, he opened the guitar case. The instrument inside was simple but beautiful, its wood warm and inviting. "Just like we practiced at home," Lily said, squeezing his hand. Minutes later, they stood on stage together. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience, but Ethan could make out Victoria in the third row, her usual polish replaced by an encouraging smile. His fingers found the familiar chords as Lily began to sing. Her voice, clear and sweet, filled the auditorium. "Moonlight dancing on your face, stars keep watch from up above. In my arms, you're safe and sound, wrapped in endless daddy's love." Ethan's deeper voice joined hers on the chorus, rough at first, then growing stronger. The simple melody carried years of bedtime moments, of tears wiped away, of a father's unwavering devotion. In the audience, tissues appeared. A few veterans who recognized Ethan sat straighter in their seats. Victoria pressed a hand to her heart, mascara threatening to run. As the last note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the applause began, building into a standing ovation. Lily threw her arms around Ethan's waist, beaming up at him. Backstage afterward, parents and teachers crowded around them with congratulations. Ethan noticed how Lily glowed with pride, how she kept looking between him and Victoria as if trying to memorize every detail. "That was beautiful," Victoria said, approaching them once the crowd had thinned. She wore a simple dress tonight, her usual diamonds absent. "Thank you for sharing it with us." For the first time, Ethan felt something other than suspicion when he looked at her. The joy of performing with Lily had cracked open something in his heart, letting in a warmth he'd almost forgotten. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for the guitar and the program funding." Victoria started to protest, but he shook his head. "I know it was you." Lily hugged Victoria's legs.
"Will you come for ice cream with us? Daddy promised we could celebrate."
That familiar uncertainty crept back into Ethan's chest. He watched Victoria interact with his daughter, so natural, so caring, and wondered what right he had to keep them apart. Yet the questions about Lily's mother's words still haunted him. But tonight wasn't for doubts. Tonight was for celebrating his daughter's smile, for the magic of music returned to his life, for the possibility that sometimes help could come without strings attached. "Ice cream sounds perfect," Victoria said, looking to Ethan for permission. He nodded, letting himself smile. The future was uncertain, but right now, in this moment, joy was enough. The small cafe glowed warmly against the darkening evening sky. Through its window, strings of soft yellow lights cast gentle shadows across the faces of those inside. At a corner table, coffee cups steamed between Ethan and Victoria, while Lily dozed peacefully in the cushioned booth beside her father, her head resting against his arm. The talent show's program lay on the table between them, spotted with coffee rings. Lily's name was circled in purple marker, with a small star drawn next to it. Her performance had brought the house down. Father and daughter singing together, Ethan's rich baritone supporting Lily's sweet, clear voice. "I still can't believe how beautiful that was," Victoria said softly, careful not to wake Lily. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, her usual polish softened by genuine emotion. "The way everyone responded. You could feel it in the room." Ethan nodded, his guard lowered by the evening's success and the comfortable warmth of the cafe. It was her mother's favorite lullaby. He gently stroked Lily's hair as she slept. "Sarah used to sing it every night, even when I was deployed." Victoria's eyes softened. "You must miss her terribly." "Every day." Ethan took a sip of his coffee, black and strong. "But moments like tonight, they help. I never thought I'd sing that song again, much less in public." "I'm so glad you did." Victoria smiled, her designer dress somehow looking less intimidating in the cafe's humble setting. "And the music program funding came through at just the right time." The school board was thrilled. "That was incredibly generous of the anonymous donor," Ethan said, giving her a knowing look. "Though maybe not so anonymous anymore." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "It's the least I could do. Besides, my family has always believed in supporting education." Though admittedly, some of our other business decisions weren't quite so beneficial to the community. What do you mean? Ethan asked, his voice casual but something in Victoria's tone making him alert. She stirred her cappuccino thoughtfully. Oh, you know how it goes. Big business, tough choices. My father had to make some difficult decisions before he passed. The pension restructuring at the mill was particularly controversial. Ethan's hand froze mid-reach for his coffee cup. The mill? Your father was Richard Langford? Yes, Victoria said, not noticing the sudden tension in his voice. Langford Industries owned several manufacturing plants in the region. The pension adjustments were necessary for the company's survival, or so he always said. Though I know it was hard on many families. Hard? Ethan's voice came out harsh, making Lily stir slightly beside him. He lowered his volume but couldn't mask the anger. Your father's pension adjustments destroyed lives. Men who gave decades to that mill had their retirement cut in half. My own father worked there for 30 years. Victoria's face paled. Ethan, do you know what happened to him? Ethan's fingers gripped his coffee cup so tightly his knuckles showed white. He had to keep working well into his 70s, developed lung problems from the factory floor. Died still trying to make ends meet. I had no idea, Victoria whispered, reaching across the table. Ethan, please. He pulled his hand away as if her touch might burn him. All this time, the fancy clothes, the charity, the kind gestures, it was bought with money stolen from working people, from veterans like me. That's not fair, Victoria protested, but her voice wavered. I wasn't involved in those decisions. No, you just benefited from them. Ethan carefully slid out of the booth, gathering the sleeping Lily in his arms. She mumbled something and nestled against his shoulder. All your talk about wanting to make amends, about understanding, it means nothing now. Victoria stood too, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Please don't do this. What happened tonight, the connection we shared, was a lie. Ethan cut her off, his voice cold. Stay away from us, Victoria. I mean it. Don't come to the church. Don't try to help. Don't even look at my daughter, Ethan. But he was already striding toward the door, Lily secure in his arms, leaving Victoria standing alone among the cheerful cafe lights that suddenly seemed much dimmer. The bell above the door chimed as he pushed through it, the sound final and sharp in the evening air. The night had grown colder while they were inside. Ethan held Lily closer as he walked quickly down the sidewalk, his breath coming out in angry clouds. Behind him, through the cafe window, Victoria remained motionless, one hand pressed against the glass, watching them disappear into the darkness. Lily stirred against his shoulder. Daddy? Where are we going? Home, sweetheart, he said, trying to keep the bitterness from his voice. We're going home. The streets were nearly empty now, their footsteps echoing off brick buildings. Store windows that had seemed welcoming earlier now felt like accusatory eyes following their retreat. Each step took them further from Victoria and the brief, fragile connection they'd shared during the talent show. Ethan's jaw clenched as he walked, his mind racing with memories of his father's struggles, of proud men forced to work well past retirement, of communities gutted by corporate greed. The same money that had funded Victoria's privileged life had been taken from families like his own. The realization felt like a physical blow. Every kind gesture from Victoria now seemed tainted, every warm moment corrupted by its source. The trust he'd begun to feel, the way he'd started to let his guard down, it all crumbled like ash in his mouth. Lily's weight in his arms was the only thing keeping him grounded as he walked through the night, his steps quick and purposeful. She was all that mattered now. He would protect her from the Langfords and their poisoned wealth, just as he'd tried to protect her from everything else in this harsh world. They reached the bus stop, and Ethan sat on the cold bench, still holding his sleeping daughter. Above them, a street lamp buzzed fitfully, casting uncertain light on the empty street. He could still feel the warmth of the cafe, still taste the coffee on his tongue, still see Victoria's stricken face as he'd walked away. But none of that mattered now. He'd made his decision. The Langford chapter of their lives was over, closed as firmly as the cafe door behind them. The autumn days grew shorter and colder. Ethan threw himself into his work with fierce determination, picking up extra shifts at both the mechanic shop and the warehouse. His hands stayed busy, tightening bolts, lifting boxes, anything to keep his mind from wandering to thoughts of Victoria Langford. At the shop, he worked beneath cars until his muscles ached, the radio's static-filled country music barely covering the endless loop of memories playing in his head. The sound of Lily's laughter as she flew the kite, Victoria's gentle voice during their conversations, the warmth of the cafe before everything shattered. "Walker, you're going to wear yourself out," his boss Mike commented one afternoon, watching Ethan attack a stubborn transmission with grim intensity. "Third double shift this week," Ethan just grunted, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "Bills don't pay themselves." But they both knew it was more than that. The other mechanics had noticed his darker mood, the way he barely spoke during lunch breaks, how he volunteered for the most demanding jobs. They gave him space, understanding the look of a man working to outrun his thoughts. Lily asked about Victoria sometimes, her voice small and confused.
Why doesn't she come to church anymore, Daddy?
"She's busy," Ethan would say, the lie bitter on his tongue. He'd distract Lily with homework or games, trying not to see the disappointment in her eyes. Across town, in her elegant penthouse office, Victoria sat at her desk, surrounded by papers and spreadsheets. Her usual impeccable appearance showed signs of strain, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her signature-styled waves. She hadn't slept well since that night at the cafe. "The Veterans Foundation paperwork is ready for your signature," her assistant said, placing another folder on her desk. "They're overwhelmed by your generosity. The board wants to name the new community center after you." "No," Victoria said sharply, then softened her tone. "No names. Everything stays anonymous. Just make sure the funds are properly allocated." She picked up the folder, scanning the details of the program she'd created: job training for veterans, housing assistance, medical support services, all the things her father's decisions had stripped away from families like Ethan's. Her fingers traced the foundation's mission statement: honoring those who served. She'd spent weeks crafting it, pouring her heart into every word, hoping somehow the good she did now could begin to balance the harm her family had caused. Late at night, she would stand at her window, looking out over the city lights. Sometimes she thought she could see the neighborhood where Ethan and Lily lived, though she knew it was too far. The distance felt symbolic, a gulf of privilege and pain she didn't know how to bridge. "I was so blind," she whispered to her reflection in the glass. "So caught up in my own importance that I couldn't see the real cost of our wealth." Her brother had tried to tell her, years ago, before his death. He'd fought with their father about the pension cuts, about corporate responsibility. She hadn't understood then. Now his words haunted her, along with the memory of Ethan's face that night, the way trust had hardened into betrayal in an instant. At the warehouse, Ethan worked mechanically, loading boxes onto pallets. The physical labor helped quiet his mind, but in the quiet moments between tasks, doubt would creep in. Had he been too harsh? Too quick to judge Victoria for her father's sins? He remembered her vulnerability in the park that day, her honest admission of loneliness, the way she'd helped Lily without expecting praise or recognition, the genuine joy on her face during the talent show. But then he'd think of his father, proud and strong, forced to work years past retirement, of other veterans struggling to survive on slashed pensions while the Langfords lived in luxury. The anger would return, hot and clarifying. One evening, after tucking Lily into bed, Ethan sat at his small kitchen table. His Medal of Honor lay before him, the metal catching the weak light from the overhead bulb. He ran his fingers over its surface, remembering the day he'd received it, how proud his father had been, how full of hope for the future. "What would you think of me now, Dad?" he whispered to the empty kitchen. "Am I protecting Lily? Or am I just running scared?" The metal offered no answers. It just gleamed quietly, a symbol of courage that suddenly felt heavy with questions. Ethan picked it up, its familiar weight in his palm bringing memories of sacrifice, honor, and the complicated truth that sometimes the right path isn't the clear one. He thought of Victoria's efforts to make amends, her clumsy but sincere attempts to bridge the gap between their worlds. He remembered the security guard's salute in the boutique, how that small act of respect had meant more than any apology. Outside his window, a car passed slowly, its headlights briefly illuminating the room. For a moment, Ethan thought he saw Sarah's reflection in the glass, remembered her gentle way of finding good in everyone. She would have had wisdom to offer, would have known how to navigate this tangle of hurt and hope. But Sarah was gone, and he was here alone with his medals and his memories. trying to be both mother and father to their daughter while keeping his own heart safely walled away. The silence of the apartment pressed in around him, broken only by the distant sound of Lily's steady breathing from her room. The metal felt colder now in his hand. He set it carefully back on the table, struck by the sudden realization that in pushing Victoria away, he might have lost something precious, not just for himself, but for Lily too. The thought settled heavily in his chest, a weight he wasn't sure how to carry. The familiar ding of the convenience store door made Ethan look up from restocking the energy drinks. He'd taken an extra shift here too, determined to keep his mind off everything that had happened. But there stood Mark Reynolds, the security guard from the boutique, holding a cup of coffee and wearing a concerned expression. "Mr. Walker," Mark said, giving him a respectful nod. "Got a minute?" Ethan straightened up, his back stiff from hours of lifting boxes. "Just Mark is fine. And yeah, I'm due for a break anyway." They stepped outside into the crisp evening air. The street lamps cast long shadows across the empty parking lot. Mark took a sip of his coffee, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Look, I know it's not my place," Mark began, "but I think there's something you should know about Miss Langford." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know enough." "With all due respect, sir, I don't think you do." Mark pulled out his phone and pulled up a news article. "Take a look at this." Reluctantly, Ethan glanced at the screen. The headline read, "Anonymous Donor Establishes Veterans Housing Initiative." His eyes widened as he saw his own name mentioned, the Ethan Walker Veterans Support Program. "That's just the beginning," Mark continued, scrolling through more articles. 3 new shelters, a scholarship fund for veterans' children, free mental health services for military families. All in your name, all anonymous. But I know it's her because I've seen her leaving the foundation offices late at night. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he handed the phone back. "Could be anyone using my name." "Sir, she's been working non-stop. I have a buddy who works security at her building. Says she's barely slept, making calls, organizing fundraisers. She sold her father's vacation house to fund these programs." The weight of this information settled heavily on Ethan's shoulders. He remembered Victoria's face at the talent show, how genuine her smile had been when Lily performed. "Why are you telling me this?" Ethan asked, his voice rough. "Because sometimes people surprise us," Mark replied simply. "And sometimes pride keeps us from seeing the truth." After Mark left, Ethan couldn't focus on work. During his break, he found himself searching online, finding more evidence of Victoria's efforts. A new medical clinic for veterans' families, a job training program, each initiative carefully planned to address real needs, not just throw money at problems. The next day, he dropped Lily off at school and drove past one of the new shelters. The sign caught his eye. Walker Veterans House, where heroes find home. Through the windows, he could see veterans gathered in what looked like a support group meeting. A young man in a wheelchair was smiling, actually smiling, as he talked with others. At the warehouse that afternoon, his supervisor mentioned they were hiring veterans through a new employment program. "Great initiative," the supervisor said. "Someone's finally doing something right for our servicemen." Ethan went home that evening to find Lily drawing at the kitchen table. She'd made a picture of 3 people holding hands, himself, Lily, and a figure that looked suspiciously like Victoria. "Do you miss her, Daddy?" Lily asked, her innocent eyes searching his face. Ethan sat heavily in the chair beside her. "It's complicated, sweetie. She made me feel special," Lily said quietly, continuing to color. "Like when Mommy used to read to me." That night, after tucking Lily in, Ethan knelt beside her bed, watching her peaceful sleeping face. The moonlight filtered through her window, casting a gentle glow across her teddy bear, the one Victoria had brought her after she'd had a bad day at school. His fingers traced the edge of his Medal of Honor, which he always kept close. The weight of it reminded him of sacrifice, of duty, of honor. But it also reminded him of forgiveness, the kind of forgiveness his wife had always believed in. "What would you tell me to do?" he whispered to the quiet room, thinking of his late wife. The anger still burned in his chest when he thought of Victoria's father, but now it mixed with confusion. How could the daughter of a man who had hurt so many veterans work so hard to make things right? Lily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something that sounded like Victoria. Ethan's heart clenched. He remembered how Victoria had looked that last night at the cafe, her face falling as she realized what her father's actions meant to him. She hadn't defended her father. She hadn't made excuses. She just looked broken. He sat back on his heels, running a hand through his hair. The evidence was undeniable. Victoria wasn't just throwing money around for show. She was working, really working, to make a difference. And she was doing it all anonymously, seeking no credit, no praise. The sound of a car passing outside drew his attention to the window. Across the street, he could see the lights of the new Veterans Center, another project he now knew Victoria had funded. Through the windows, he could see men and women in uniform, gathering for what looked like a late-night support group. His anger warred with gratitude, pride with understanding. The woman who had humiliated him in that boutique was the same woman who had sold her inheritance to help his fellow veterans, the same woman who had made his daughter smile again. Ethan touched Lily's small hand, so trusting even in sleep. "Maybe," he whispered, more to himself than to his sleeping daughter. "Maybe we all deserve a second chance." The question hung in the air, unanswered. Should he reach out to Victoria? Could he set aside his pride, his hurt, for something bigger? He remained there, kneeling beside Lily's bed, torn between the past he couldn't forget and a future he hadn't imagined possible. Soft flakes drifted past the stained glass windows of St. Michael's Church, coating the world outside in a gentle white blanket. Inside, warmth radiated from the old radiators that clanked and hissed in the corner of the fellowship hall. Christmas decorations hung from the ceiling, paper chains and tinsel stars made by the Sunday school children. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by pieces of fabric and costume parts for the upcoming Christmas pageant. His large hands, more used to engine parts and heavy lifting, carefully held a small angel wing made of wire and white fabric. Lily stood on a chair nearby, practicing her lines while Mrs. Thompson, the elderly pageant director, nodded encouragingly. "And lo," the angel said unto them. Lily's voice rang clear and sweet through the hall. Ethan smiled, even as he struggled with the stubborn wire that refused to hold its shape. A small tear had formed in one of the wings, and his attempts to fix it only seemed to make it worse. He'd never been good at this sort of thing. Sarah had always handled the costumes and craft projects. "Fear not," Lily continued, "for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy." The sound of the heavy church door opening drew everyone's attention. A gust of cold air swept in, carrying snowflakes and a familiar figure. Victoria stood in the doorway, but she looked different than Ethan had ever seen her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. Instead, she wore simple jeans, a worn sweater, and boots dusted with snow. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she carried a large canvas bag. The room fell silent. Mrs. Thompson looked between Ethan and Victoria, sensing the tension. Lily's face lit up, but she stayed on her chair, uncertain. Victoria's voice was soft, hesitant. "I heard you needed help with the costumes." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked down at the mangled wing in his hands, feeling the weight of his pride warring with the reality of his helplessness with the task before him. Mrs. Thompson, bless her heart, broke the awkward silence. "Oh, thank heavens. These old eyes aren't what they used to be for sewing. Come in, come in." Victoria moved carefully through the room, as if afraid to disturb the delicate peace. She set her bag down near Ethan but kept a respectful distance. From it, she pulled out a small sewing kit, thread, and extra fabric. "May I?" she asked quietly, gesturing to the wing in Ethan's hands. He wanted to say no, wanted to tell her they didn't need her help or her charity. But the wing was falling apart, and Lily's performance was in 3 days. Wordlessly, he handed it over. Victoria settled onto the floor, tucking her legs under her like a schoolgirl. Her fingers, usually adorned with expensive rings, were bare as they worked with the needle and thread. She didn't speak, didn't try to make small talk or justify her presence. She simply worked. Ethan watched as she carefully trimmed loose threads and reinforced weak spots in the fabric. Her stitches were small and even, practiced. When the needle pricked her finger, she didn't complain, just quietly wiped the drop of blood on her jeans and continued working. "Daddy," Lily called from her perch, "can I practice my song now?" "Go ahead, sweetheart," Ethan replied, his eyes still on Victoria's working hands. As Lily's clear voice filled the room with a way and a manger, Victoria reached for more thread. Ethan noticed her fingers were red from the cold, and without thinking, he pushed the space heater closer to her. She looked up, surprised by the gesture, and their eyes met briefly. There was no pretense in her face now, no social mask or careful composure, just tired eyes and a grateful smile that disappeared as quickly as it came. The evening wore on. More children arrived for practice, filling the hall with the controlled chaos of excitement and nerves. Victoria worked steadily through it all, moving from the wings to other costume repairs that Mrs. Thompson kept finding. She helped a shepherd with his torn robe, fixed Mary's head covering, and reinforced the elastic on several halos. When she reached for the next costume piece, her hands were shaking slightly from fatigue. Without a word, Ethan handed her his coffee cup. She took a sip, then blinked in surprise at the sweetness. He'd added cream and sugar the way he'd seen her drink it at the cafe weeks ago. "Thank you," she whispered, the first words she'd spoken in hours. The snow continued to fall outside, coating the church windows in frost patterns that caught the golden light from within. As the children practiced their finale, Ethan found himself stealing glances at Victoria. She was nothing like the woman who had humiliated him in the boutique. This Victoria, with her pricked fingers and quiet determination, seemed real in a way her polished version never had. He thought about what Mark had told him about the veterans programs, about the anonymous donations that bore his name. He watched as she patiently showed a little girl how to tie her costume sash, her voice gentle and encouraging. When practice ended and parents began collecting their children, Victoria gathered her things quietly. The wing she'd repaired was now stronger than new, and she'd fixed a dozen other costume pieces besides. She stood, wincing slightly from sitting on the hard floor for so long. Lily ran over and hugged her legs. "Thank you for fixing my wings, Miss Victoria. They're perfect now." Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she patted Lily's head. "You're welcome, sweetheart. You'll be a beautiful angel." She turned to go, but Ethan found himself speaking. "It's still snowing pretty hard." Victoria paused at the door, her hand on the handle. "You shouldn't drive in this," he continued, surprising himself. "There's coffee in the kitchen. We could wait it out." Something shifted in his chest as he watched her shoulders relax, just slightly. She turned back, and in her eyes he saw not the wealthy woman who'd looked down on him, but someone who was just as lost and searching as he was. The hardness he'd been carrying since learning about her father began to crack, like ice in spring thaw. Snow fell in thick, gentle flakes outside St. Michael's Church, turning the evening into a Christmas card scene. Colored lights spilled through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows on the pristine white ground. Inside, the historic church buzzed with excitement as families filed in, shaking snow from their coats and finding seats in the polished wooden pews. Ethan stood in the back, tugging at the collar of his one good shirt. He'd ironed it 3 times, determined to look his best for Lily's big night. His work-roughened hands fidgeted with the program, creasing and uncreasing the paper as his eyes scanned the growing crowd. In the Sunday school room that served as a makeshift dressing area, Lily twirled in her angel costume. The wings that Victoria had repaired caught the light, somehow more beautiful for having been broken and mended. Mrs. Thompson fussed over the children, straightening halos and adjusting shepherd's robes with grandmotherly patience. "Daddy," Lily called out when she spotted him in the doorway. "Do I look like a real angel?" Ethan's throat tightened as he looked at his daughter. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Her cheeks flushed pink. The white costume made her look ethereal, almost too precious for this world. "You look perfect, sweetheart," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. A movement near the church entrance caught his attention. Victoria stood there, dressed simply in a blue wool dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. She carried a wrapped package, but stayed near the back, as if uncertain of her welcome. Their eyes met across the room, and she gave a small, hesitant wave. Before Ethan could respond, Mrs. Thompson's voice rose above the chatter. "Places, everyone! Places!" The children scattered to their positions, a flutter of angels, shepherds, and wise men hurrying through the church hall. Ethan found a seat in the middle pew, his heart pounding as if he were the one about to perform. The lights dimmed, and Pastor Roberts stepped forward to welcome everyone. Somewhere in the back, Ethan was aware of Victoria slipping into a seat near the door. The pageant began with the traditional narration from Luke. Small shepherds shuffled onto the stage, their battery-operated candles flickering. Mary and Joseph made their way down the aisle. Joseph trying hard not to trip over his oversized robe. Then came the angels scene. Lily stepped forward, her repaired wings catching the light just so, and began to speak. "Fear not," her clear voice rang out, just as they'd practiced. But this time, something was different. She stood straighter, more confident, her words carrying to every corner of the church. "For behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy." Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. In that moment, he saw Sarah in every gesture, every inflection of Lily's voice. He gripped the pew in front of him, overwhelmed by love and loss and pride all at once. The pageant continued, moving through the familiar story. The children sang their carols, sometimes off-key but always earnest. When they reached the finale, Silent Night, the entire congregation joined in, their voices rising to the rafters in harmony. As the last notes faded away, Pastor Roberts stepped forward to give the blessing. Parents began reaching for coats and cameras, ready to collect their little performers. Ethan made his way to the Sunday school room, where Lily was bouncing with excitement. "Did you see me, Daddy? Did you hear how I didn't forget any words? You were amazing, sweetheart," he said, kneeling to hug her. "The best angel I've ever seen." A soft voice spoke behind them. "Lily, I have something for you." They turned to find Victoria standing there, holding her wrapped package. She'd taken such care with the wrapping. Silver paper with delicate snowflakes, tied with a white ribbon that matched Lily's costume. "Can I open it now, Daddy?" Lily asked, practically vibrating with anticipation. Ethan nodded, watching as Lily carefully untied the ribbon. Inside was a handmade doll, dressed in an exact miniature of Lily's angel costume, down to the tiny repaired wings. The doll's face was hand-painted with loving detail, and its dark hair matched Lily's exactly. "Oh," Lily breathed, holding the doll as if it were made of glass. "She looks just like me." Victoria knelt down beside her, and Ethan noticed her hands were still marked with tiny needle pricks. "I made her special for you," she said softly. "See? She even has little wings just like yours." Lily threw her arms around Victoria's neck, the doll pressed between them. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," she exclaimed, her joy infectious. Ethan watched as Victoria held his daughter, saw the tears that sprang to her eyes at Lily's unrestrained affection. These weren't the careful social tears he'd seen at charity events in newspaper photos. These were real, leaving mascara-stained tracks down her cheeks that she didn't even try to hide. The church slowly emptied, the sounds of congratulations and goodbyes echoing off the high ceiling. Soon only the three of them remained in the hall, standing amid scattered programs and dropped costume pieces. The snow continued to fall outside, visible through the windows in the soft glow of the church lights. Lily sat on a pew, completely absorbed in her new doll, while Victoria tried discreetly to wipe her eyes. Ethan found himself reaching into his pocket for the handkerchief Sarah had embroidered for him years ago. One of the few nice things he still owned. "Here," he said quietly, holding it out to Victoria. She looked at the handkerchief, then at him, fresh tears welling up. "I don't deserve your kindness," she whispered. "Maybe that's what makes it kindness," he replied, surprising himself with the words. The empty church hall felt sacred somehow, as if the pageant's message of peace and goodwill still lingered in the air. Lily's voice drifted over to them as she sang softly to her doll, her angel wings slightly crooked now, after all the hugging. Mrs. Thompson poked her head in from the Sunday school room. "Should I turn out the lights in here?" "We'll take care of it," Ethan assured her. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Thompson." The elderly woman smiled knowingly at the three of them before disappearing again, leaving them alone in the quiet church hall. Snow fell in thick, gentle flakes outside St. Michael's Church, turning the evening into a Christmas card scene. Colored light spilled through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows on the pristine white ground. Inside, the historic church buzzed with excitement as families filed in, their voices echoing off the high wooden beams. Ethan Walker stood at the back of the empty church hall, watching his daughter Lily curl up on a cushioned bench, her angel costume slightly rumpled. The hand-sewn doll Victoria had given her was tucked safely in her arms. His chest tightened at the sight, not with the familiar pain of loss, but with something warmer. Victoria lingered near the piano, her fingers trailing absently over the polished wood. She dressed simply tonight in a cream sweater and dark slacks, her usual designer clothes nowhere to be seen. The transformation went deeper than clothes, though. Her shoulders had lost their rigid pride, and her eyes held a gentleness he'd never noticed before. The last notes of Silent Night drifted from the sanctuary where the choir was finishing practice. Moonlight streamed through the windows, dancing with the colored lights from the Christmas tree in the corner. The effect was magical, almost healing. Ethan found himself walking toward Victoria before he could stop himself. The sound of his footsteps made her turn, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. All the anger he'd carried about her father's actions felt distant now, softened by the evidence of her changed heart. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For the doll, for everything you've done for the veterans. I heard about it from Jim, the security guard from the boutique." Victoria's cheeks flushed. "I didn't do it for recognition, I know. That's what makes it mean something." The piano bench creaked as Victoria sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "I've spent so much of my life being what my family expected. Proud, distant, better than everyone else." She glanced at sleeping Lily. "Your daughter taught me more about love in a few months than I learned in 40 years of privilege." Ethan followed her gaze. Lily looked so peaceful, so trusting, just like her mother. But for the first time, thinking of his late wife didn't bring that crushing weight of grief. Instead, he remembered her laugh, her kindness, the way she always believed people could change. The choir's practice ended, and the last few voices faded away, leaving them in comfortable silence. Outside, the snow continued to fall, muffling the world in white peace. The Christmas tree lights twinkled like stars brought down to earth. Suddenly overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment, Ethan held out his hand to Victoria. She looked at it, surprised. "Dance with me?" he asked softly. Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she placed it in his. He helped her up, and they moved to the center of the empty hall. No music played, but they didn't need any. Their steps fell naturally into a slow rhythm, like they'd been dancing together for years. Victoria's other hand rested lightly on his shoulder, and Ethan's free hand settled at her waist. They moved in gentle circles, moonlight and colored lights painting patterns across their faces. "I was so angry," Ethan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "About your father, about that day in the boutique, about everything that happened after I came home from deployment." Victoria's fingers tightened slightly on his shoulder.
"You had every right to be."
"Maybe, but anger doesn't leave room for healing." He glanced at Lily again, peaceful in her dreams. Or for second chances. They turned slowly, their shadows merging on the wooden floor. Victoria's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Do you believe in second chances?" she asked. Ethan thought about all the walls he'd built around his heart since losing his wife. He thought about how Lily had slowly pulled Victoria past those walls, showing him a truth his pride hadn't wanted to see. "I'm starting to," he whispered. Their dance slowed until they were barely moving, just swaying together in the quiet church hall. The snow outside made everything feel hushed, sacred, like the world was holding its breath. Victoria lifted her face to look at him, and Ethan saw all her defenses had fallen away. No more society mask, no more guilty conscience, just a woman who had learned what really mattered in life. His own heart felt lighter than it had in years. The weight of distrust and anger had lifted, replaced by something that felt a lot like hope. Their eyes met and held, no longer as enemies but as two broken people finding healing together. In that moment, surrounded by Christmas lights and falling snow, with his daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, Ethan realized that sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in forgiveness. A week after the Christmas pageant, warmth and the smell of baking chicken filled Ethan Walker's modest kitchen. The small space felt different tonight. Brighter somehow, despite the winter darkness pressing against the windows. Steam rose from a pot of vegetables on the stove, while bread warmed in the oven, creating a cozy atmosphere that made the cramped quarters feel more like home than they had in years. Lily sat at their scratched wooden table, her legs swinging beneath her chair as she arranged her vegetables into silly faces on her plate. Her new angel doll watched the proceedings from a safe perch on the counter, away from any potential food spills. Victoria, wearing a simple sweater instead of her usual designer clothes, stirred gravy in a pan while Ethan carved the chicken. "And then Jimmy said frogs don't wear shoes," Lily giggled, launching into another playground story. "But I told him maybe they do, we just can't see them because they're frog-sized." Victoria's laugh joined Lily's, genuine and unrestrained. Well, that's perfectly logical. Maybe they have tiny boots for rainy days. Dad, do frogs have rain boots? Lily turned to Ethan with complete seriousness. Ethan couldn't help but smile, a real smile that reached his eyes. I don't think so, sweetheart. But maybe they should. The conversation flowed easily as they settled around the table. Victoria had insisted on bringing dinner, but not from an expensive restaurant. Instead, she'd arrived with grocery bags and a determination to cook alongside them. Now, watching her pass the bread basket to Lily, Ethan marveled at how natural it felt. This gravy is amazing, he said, surprising himself with the compliment. Where did you learn to cook like this? Victoria's cheeks flushed slightly. Our housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. I used to hide in the kitchen when my parents had their society parties. She taught me everything she knew. She paused, her expression softening. She was the only one who saw me as just Victoria, not a Langford. Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. The name Langford had been a wall between them, but tonight it felt less like a barrier and more like a story. One of many that made up who Victoria really was. Tell us more about Mrs. Chen, Lily requested, carefully spreading butter on her bread.
Did she make cookies too?
The best almond cookies in the world, Victoria smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in it. She taught me that real love shows up in the small things, like remembering someone's favorite dish, or making sure they eat when they're sad. The words hung in the air, carrying more weight than just talk of cookies. Ethan thought about the groceries that had appeared at his door weeks ago, the art supplies for Lily, all the quiet ways Victoria had tried to show she cared. Dad makes good mac and cheese when I'm sad, Lily offered, reaching for seconds of chicken.
And he sings the rainbow song.
The rainbow song? Victoria raised an eyebrow at Ethan. He ducked his head, embarrassed but smiling.
It's nothing special, just something her mom and I made up when she was little.
A comfortable silence fell, broken only by the clink of forks against plates. Through the window, snow had started falling again, adding to the peaceful atmosphere inside. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat.
You know, I still have moments when I'm scared, he admitted quietly.
About trust. About the future. About doing right by Lily. Victoria set down her fork, giving him her full attention. Lily continued eating, but her movements slowed, listening in that perceptive way children often do. I understand that, Victoria replied softly.
I haven't always given you reasons to trust me.
No, but you've given me reasons to try. Ethan's voice was steady despite the vulnerability in his words. My chaplain overseas used to say that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past. It's about choosing to build something new despite it. And faith, well, faith means taking that first step even when you're not sure where it leads. Victoria's eyes glistened in the kitchen's warm light.
I want you to know that I'll work every day to earn your trust, Ethan.
Both of you. She glanced at Lily, who had abandoned all pretense of not listening. However long it takes. However long? Lily echoed, looking between them hopefully. However long, Victoria confirmed, her voice firm with conviction. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, like a weight he'd carried for years was finally beginning to lift. Without overthinking it, he reached across the table and took Victoria's hand in his. Her fingers were warm, and they trembled slightly as they curled around his. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it carried all the hope and possibility of new beginnings. Through the window, snowflakes danced in the glow of the porch light, and inside, the small kitchen held 3 people finding their way towards something that felt remarkably like family. Snow drifted lazily through the cold December air as the midnight service drew to a close. The church's stained glass windows glowed warmly from within, casting colorful patterns on the fresh white blanket covering the ground. Inside, the congregation sang the final verses of Silent Night, their voices rising in gentle harmony toward the vaulted ceiling. Ethan Walker sat in the wooden pew with Lily snuggled against his side, her small hand wrapped tightly in his. Victoria Langford sat on Lily's other side, elegant even in her simple wool coat, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as the final notes faded away. The pastor's closing prayer echoed through the hushed sanctuary. May the spirit of Christmas fill your hearts with peace, joy, and love. Go forth blessed by his grace. Amen.
Amen,
the congregation whispered back. As people began gathering their coats and scarves, Lily tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Daddy, look!" She pointed to the large windows where fat snowflakes could be seen swirling in the golden glow of the street lamps. "It's magical." Ethan smiled down at his daughter, remembering how many Christmas Eves he'd spent alone with her, trying his best to create holiday memories while carrying the weight of grief and isolation. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the empty spaces in their lives didn't seem quite so vast. Victoria stood gracefully, smoothing her coat. "Shall we brave the cold?" she asked, her voice soft with affection. The weeks since the Christmas pageant had gentled her once sharp edges, replacing her defensive pride with genuine warmth. Ethan helped Lily into her red winter coat, the one Victoria had given her but pretended to find on sale. He knew better now, knew that her generosity came not from pity, but from love. The same love that had driven her to spend countless hours working for veterans' causes, seeking redemption not through grand gestures but through quiet service. They made their way down the aisle, nodding to fellow churchgoers. The security guard who had once saluted Ethan at the boutique was there with his family. He offered a respectful nod, his eyes crinkling with approval at the sight of the three of them together. At the heavy wooden doors, Ethan helped Lily button her coat all the way up. Victoria adjusted the girl's knit hat, tucking stray blonde curls underneath with maternal tenderness. The gesture made Ethan's heart tighten, not with jealousy as it once might have, but with gratitude. They stepped out into the winter night together. The church bells began to toll, their deep, resonant chimes echoing across the snow-hushed town. 12 solemn rings to herald Christmas Day. Lily's face lit up with wonder as snowflakes landed on her upturned face. "It's like being inside a snow globe," she exclaimed, spinning in a small circle with her arms outstretched. Victoria laughed, the sound clear and joyful in the crisp air. She caught Lily's hand as the girl twirled, steadying her. The lamplight caught the silver threads in Victoria's dark hair, making them shimmer like the snow. Ethan watched them together, his daughter, and the woman who had moved from stranger to enemy to something so much more. The woman who had taught him that forgiveness wasn't weakness, that change was possible, that love could heal even the deepest wounds. The last bell toll faded into the night. Other families were dispersing to their cars or walking home through the gentle snowfall, but the three of them lingered on the church steps, reluctant to break the spell of the moment. Lily slipped her small hand into Ethan's, and her other hand found Victoria's. They stood connected, forming a circle of warmth against the winter chill. The snow continued to fall, dusting their shoulders and catching in their eyelashes. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, the last piece of his guarded heart finally settling into place. He looked down at his daughter's bright face, then across at Victoria's gentle smile, and knew with sudden clarity that this was what healing looked like. "Lily," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion, "we're never going to be alone again." Lily squeezed both their hands. "I know, Daddy," she whispered back, wise beyond her years. "We're family now." Victoria's eyes met Ethan's over Lily's head, and he saw in them the same certainty he felt. They had all been broken in different ways, by war, by loss, by privilege, by pride. But standing here in the snow, their hands linked and their hearts open, they were whole. The three of them descended the church steps together, their footprints marking a path in the fresh snow. The night wrapped around them like a blessing, and the windows of the church glowed behind them like stars fallen to earth. They walked into the snowy night not as separate souls divided by wealth or circumstance, but as a family bound together by something stronger than any past wound, the healing power of compassion, the grace of forgiveness, and the transformative miracle of love. Lily swung their joined hands as they walked, humming "Silent Night" under her breath. Above them, the snow continued to fall, each flake a tiny reminder that beauty could come from the cold, that light could emerge from darkness, and that sometimes the greatest gifts arrived in ways no one could have predicted. Their footsteps crunched softly in the snow as they made their way through the peaceful night, 3 hearts beating in harmony, 3 lives woven together by fate and choice and the mysterious workings of grace. The path ahead was bright with promise, illuminated by street lamps and starlight and the glow of newfound joy. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Walker, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.